Get y'all ready for the test here. So 1 through 3, distance and midpoint between the 2 points. That's all it's asking us to do is find the midpoint and distance. So our midpoint formula, if I can write, midpoint is our x1 plus x2 over 2, comma y1 plus y2 over 2. So for us here, the midpoint is going to be -2 plus 4 over 2, comma 6 plus -3 over 2. And at this point here, we can just calculate this. -2 plus 4 over 2. It's going to be 1. Six plus -3 over 2 is, yeah. That's it. Questions on finding midpoint? Distance formula, x2 square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So our x values, -2 minus 4 squared, plus our y value, 6 minus -3 squared. So we'll plug in, put our x's with our x's, y's with our y's. Now the negative really is going to be a plus. And at this point here, we can just grab the calculator, say second square root, -2 minus 4 squared plus 6 plus 3 squared, 2 squared of 13. And that's it. Now some of them, especially on the test, might give you all decimals round to the nearest hundredth, so we're going out 2 places, 10.82. For which one? Ah, 3. Yes. Sorry. No, that's just me miswriting. Yeah, I don't know where I got the 2 from, but it should have been 3. Square root of 13. Yes. Thank you. But that's it. If it gives it to you in radical form, I'll take radical form. If it won't give it to you in radical form, round it to 2 decimal places. Questions on midpoint and distance formula? Okay. We good with 1 through 3. 4 through 6, these aren't going to actually be on the test. Determine which quadrant in which xy can be located. Although they're not too bad for this here. Y equals x squared plus 6. Because one way we can do this is I can grab the graphing calculator, say y equals x squared plus 6 graph. We can see that the points on this graph are in the top 2 quadrants. So the quadrants that this is in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2, in the first and second quadrants. Now, number 5 is a circle. x minus 2 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 100. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. Well, the center is this point h comma k. So since it's x minus 2, the h value is going to be 2 because it comes out, we flip the sign. Y minus k, y plus 2. So it's going to come out as negative 2. So we have 2, negative 2. This point here is our center. Now our radius is going to be 10 because the radius squared is 100. So the radius itself would be 10. So that means 10 points from this here would be our circle. So 2, 8 is on the circle. Negative 2, 8 is also on the circle. And we have all the points in between, which actually means this is in quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's actually in all 4. Interestingly enough. So it actually works out to go into all 4 quadrants. Questions on this here? And last one, y squared is equal to x plus 4. Well, let's get y by itself. Y squared is equal to x plus 4. Y is equal to plus or minus the square root of 4. Because once we get it into y equals square root of x plus 4, and we also have negative square root x plus 4. This one's actually in all 4. Well, for values of x that are what? Greater than 0. So even though the graph does show it in all 4, since we're restricting x to be greater than 0, it's only going to be in the first and fourth. Second and third is true for the graph, but we restricted it to be positive, so it's only the first and fourth that you can actually show up. But again, these aren't going to show up on the test. Questions on these here? 7 through 9, which one of these do y'all want to look at? Hey, determine whether each point lies on the graph. So we can start off with 8a. 1, 5, well, x, y. So if this lies on the graph, if I plug in 1 for x, I should get a y value of 5. Well, 1 minus 2 is going to be negative 1. Absolute value of negative 1 is 1. 4 minus 1 is 3. So for a, we can say no. 1, 5 does not lie on the graph because it does not give us a true statement. Now, if we look at B, 6, 0. So again, what that's saying is if we plug in 6 for x, 0 for y, we should get a true statement. Absolute value, so 6 minus 2 is 4. Absolute value of 4 is 4. And 4 minus 4 is 0. So yes, it makes a true statement. When x is 6, the y value is indeed 0. Any other questions on 7 through 8 for one of those that y'all want to see done? We good with 7 through 8? Because just plug in the x and y value and see if it makes a true statement. If it does, then it's true. If it doesn't, then no. Use the algebraic test to check for symmetry to the x-axis, y-axis, and origin. Now, as we had written x-axis, it's symmetric to the x if x comma y is on it and x comma negative y. Y-axis is the point x comma y is included in the point negative x comma y. And origin if the point x comma y is included in negative x, negative y is included. So we can start with number 10. And to check for x-axis, what we do is we take this equation and replace y with negative y. If we can replace y with negative y and get the same equation back, then it is indeed symmetric to the x-axis. Now our x times negative y is negative xy is equal to 4. Now our original xy was positive. It is now negative. So we can multiply this or divide it by negative 1, which will give us a positive xy, but it'll tell us it's equal to negative 4. Is that the original equation? No. So what that means for us is it's not symmetric to the x-axis. Y-axis. We'll do a similar thing, but this time we're going to replace x with negative x instead of y. Negative x times y is going to be negative xy. We can already tell at this point it's not going to work because that's the same thing we got for reflection across the x-axis, yes? We could divide by negative 1, multiply by negative 1. We still get the same thing. So it's not symmetric to the x or y-axis. So the last one we can try is origin. And if it's symmetric to the origin, it means we're replacing both the x and the y by negative x and negative y respectively. Now negative x times negative y is going to be what? Positive xy, which is equal to 4. Is that our original equation? Yeah, so it's symmetric with respect to the origin. Because when we replaced x and y with negative x and y, and we simplified, we got our starting equation. So it's symmetric with respect to the origin. If that did not give us the original equation back, it would have been none of them. No symmetry. Because it doesn't have to be. It could be one x, y, origin, or none. Doesn't have to have one. We can look at 11. Y times x squared plus 1. So we can start off with x-axis. So we're going to replace y with negative y. So it just tells us that we have negative y times x squared plus 1 is equal to 1. At this point, we can divide by negative 1, multiply by negative 1, but there's no real way to get back to this here, because if we divide by negative 1, yes, the right side of the equation would become positive, but the left side would be negative. It wouldn't match up. So x-axis is out. Y-axis. This time we're going to replace x with negative x. Now here we can do some simplifying. Our negative x squared, negative x times negative x is positive x squared. Is this back where we started? Yes. So it is symmetric with respect to the y-axis. Yeah. So we replaced x with negative x. What's negative x times negative x? Negative times a negative is a positive. X times x is squared. Because multiplying it by itself will square it. Square rooting an x squared will get rid of that power. Because all the square is saying is still it's being multiplied by itself. Because it is still being multiplied by itself here. It's just that that negative simplified. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Because all we're seeing is what would happen if I plugged a negative version of that number in. Would I get the same value back out? Because another way to write this equation really is saying that we have y is equal to 1 over x squared plus 1. Alpha y equals enter. And it is kind of hard to see, but it is symmetric to that y-axis. It's just a flip across it. And we can look at the last one. X plus y squared equals 0. Well, we can start off with the x-axis. And to see if it's symmetric to the x-axis, we replace y with negative y. Huh? It's going to work because negative y squared is y squared. We get back to our original equation. So this one is symmetric to the x-axis. Because again, all this is saying is that for this last one, that if 2, so that would be, well, let's just say 4. If the x value is 4, no, so it need to be negative 4. The y value should be 2. And this negative 4 plus 2 squared equals 0. So we'd have negative 4 plus 4 equals 0. That is true. Now, according for this here to be symmetric to the x-axis, if x comma y is there, x comma negative y is also there, which means negative 4 comma negative 2 should also be true. So we'd have negative 4 plus negative 2 squared is still 0. Well, negative 4 is still negative 4. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. It works because that's all that's saying. Questions on our symmetry for x, y, and the origin? Write the equation of a circle. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So the center they gave us to this here is 3, 4. So we'd have x minus 3 because it's h comma k is our center. So if we plug the values of h and k in, so we'd have x minus 3 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to our radius squared. Well, 7.4 squared is 54.76. Equals and that's it. I mean, for this next one here, we'd have x minus 2.7 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to 16 squared, 256. x minus 4 squared plus y minus 3 squared. Square root of 3 squared would just be 3. Yes, sir. Yes. The only thing we'd have different is if the center had negatives, because if it was negative 3, our x minus negative 3 or y minus negative 3 would make it y plus 3. Negative, negative, make it positive. And that's it. And our square root squared, well, the square root and square will cancel. Find the center and radius. Well, again, now the center is the point h comma k. So our h value would be 7/9 because it's h minus, or x minus h. Here the x's line up, the minuses line up, so h just has to be 7/9. And our other part's y plus 3/8. So it indeed would be negative 3/8. Because since it's plus inside, we have to change it. Because really what it's saying for the second part is that we have y minus negative 3/8 to line up with our formula, y minus k. Radius is going to be the square root of 6, because r squared gave us 6. We take the square root of that 6 to find out that the radius is the square root of 6. Does that make sense? Let's just go on to the other one, 17. Center. Out of the two values for the center, the k value is nice, y minus 2, so the k value is 2. What is the h value? 0. There's no parentheses, it's just x squared, it's going to be 0. Radius is square root of 9, it is 3. Yep, that's it. Questions on this here? Find the slope and y-intercept. M is our slope, B is our y-intercept. So for 18, what's the slope? 9/7. Now our y-intercept. This one, it's not so much that one's right, one way's wrong, but that y-intercept and x-intercept is technically a point. And the x value of said point is 0, because it's where it's crossing the y-axis. X-intercepts, the y value is 0. And it's 0 comma b, so our b value is 6 over 101. Now, the reason I say there's not a right way or wrong way to put this, because it depends on what they're asking. Because if they're asking for the y value of the y-intercept, then the correct answer would be 6 over 101. If it's asking for the y-intercept, it's technically looking for 0 comma 6 over 101. Does that make sense, the difference between those two? And for the most part, I will take either one, but sometimes they want it to be more specific. Here, 2x plus 3y equals 10. We need to get it in y equals mx plus b form for us to really be able to see this. So the first thing we can do is move the x over. Subtract 2x, not 2y, from both sides, which will tell me that 3y is equal to negative 2x plus 10. And lastly, we would divide everything by 3, telling us y is equal to negative 2/3 x plus 10/3. So our slope is negative 2/3. Our y-intercept is the point 0 comma 10/3. Solve it for y, find our slope and y-intercept. Questions on this here? Are you ready for the next one? Find the slope. Slope formula is what? Delta y over delta x, yes? Delta just means change. Change in y over change in x, because that's what we're doing. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. How much or how far is the y value changing over how much is the x value changing? So for 20, we can say negative 7 minus 1 over 9 minus negative 2. And at this point here, you can stick that whole thing in the calculator, let it do it for you. Or we can do it by hand. Negative 7 minus 1 is negative 8. The negative negative makes a plus. 9 plus 2 is 11. Negative 8 over 11 doesn't reduce, so that's our slope. So that's all that's for. 21, slope. Negative 6.3 minus 7 over 8.7 minus negative 2.9. Negative 6.3 minus 7 is going to be negative 13.3. On the bottom, the negative and negative is going to make a plus. Negative 13.3 over 11.6. We're going to have to reduce this. 13.3 over 11.6, negative 133 over 116. Yep. Because the reason it doesn't look like it is, we can't have decimals. We can't have decimals and fractions together. Yeah, so having a decimal in the top or bottom of the fraction doesn't help us. And there's no common factors between these two. So really all they did was multiply top and bottom by 10 to get the decimal out, and that was it. And on this and on the test, always, try to get it to a decimal, or try to get to a fraction first, especially like this here. If it won't, 2 places. Give me 2 places. Find the equation line. For 22, the first thing we're going to need to find is the slope. Looking at this here, what's the value of the slope going to be? So we'd have 9 on top, yes? Slope's undefined because we can't divide by 0. Which means we have a vertical line going up and down. So it's just x equals. If the slope is 0, if the numerator was 0, it's going to be y equals. If the x values are the same, it's going straight up and down. Because since it gave us 2 points, we had to find the slope first. It's undefined, so it's just x equals. If we got a number for the slope, our next step is put in point slope form. And then get it into y equals mx plus b form. Now here, they told us the slope was 3/4. Now our point, -2, -5. Plug -5 in for y, -2 in for x. And in both of these places, we do have that negative, so it's going to make it positive. We'll distribute the 3/4 first. 3/4 times x is 3/4 x. 3/4 times 2 is going to be 3/2. Because 3/4 times 2 would be 6/4. 6/4 does reduce by 2 to 3/2. Lastly, we need to get y by itself. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides, telling us y is equal to 3/4 x minus 7/2. You don't have to do that in your head, because the calculator will do 3/2 minus 5. But if we're doing this and getting them to be the same, the denominators have to be the same, yes? So we'd have to have denominator of 2. So what divided by 2 is 5? What divided by 2 gives us 5? 10, because 10 divided by 2 is 5, yes? So 10/2 is 5, yes? So 3/2 minus 10/2, 3 minus 10 would be 7. Or 5 times 2 gets us our 10/2. It's pretty much, we're just trying to get that so the denominators are the same. But that's it. Questions? Now, if they do give us more than one point to use, all you got to do is pick one of the 2 points for point slope. Both will work. They're both on the equation of the line. Does that make sense? Questions on this here? 24 and 25. Find the equation of the line that is parallel and perpendicular to the given line. Parallel slopes are same. Parallel slopes are same. Perpendicular slopes. There's not a second P in slopes. Opposite reciprocal. Opposite reciprocal. Change the sign and flip it. So with parallel and perpendicular, we need the slope, yes? Does it matter about the rest of the equation of the line? Not so much. So at 24, if I was doing this and looking at this, well, I am trying to find the slope. So I know I'm going to have to subtract the 5x and then divide by 3, yes? So if I subtract the 5x, I get -5x divided by 3 should be -5/3, if I was looking at it. If that doesn't make sense, let's just solve it. Subtract 5x from both sides. -3y is equal to -5x plus 0. So the slope is indeed -5/3. Parallel. We'll do parallel first. Because with parallel, the slopes are the same. So we're going to go back to our point slope form. Our y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I'm going to replace the slope with -5/3. And the point they gave us is 7/8, 3/4. At this point here, we just need to get it in y equals form. So the first thing we can do is distribute. Telling us y minus 3/4 is going to be equal to -5/3 x plus 5 times 7 is 35. 3 times 8 is 24. Lastly, we can add 3/4 to both sides. It's not going to be 38/24 because they're not the same denominator. Uh, 52. (53/24). Close. That's it. Now the perpendicular is going to look very similar to parallel because we're still using the same point, 3/4 and 7/8. So they would go in the same spots like we used with parallel. But the perpendicular slope is going to be the opposite reciprocal. Since the original slope was negative, our perpendicular slope is going to be positive. Since the original slope was 5/3, the perpendicular slope is going to be 3/5. So we change the sign and flip it. And after we do that, same thing. 3/5 times x is 3/5 x. Minus 3/5 times 7/8 is going to be 21/40. And lastly, we're going to add 3/4 to both sides. And we get y equals 3/5 x plus 9/40. This one's actually kind of nice, or easy to do, because we need the denominator to be the same, yes? Well, one of them's 40, so if I multiply 3/4 by 10, we get 30/40. So we're looking at 30 minus 21, positive 9. Although the calculator can also do negative 21/40 plus 3/4. Yes. Yes. Questions on finding the parallel and perpendicular slope? We feel good with these here. Are you able to find the slopes?
So how can I understand where you flipped it and then?
So perpendicular slopes are opposite reciprocals. So what's the original slope? So opposite means it's going from positive to negative and flipped. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because by definition, two lines or two slopes are perpendicular if and only if the product of the two slopes is -1. That's the only way we can have perpendicular slopes. So this means if I divide both sides by m2, the other slope, it's saying that the first slope is equal to -1 over m2. We flip it. It's the opposite reciprocal. Change the sign and flip it. Does that make sense? Because, I mean, with -3 or -5/3, we're saying that its perpendicular slope is -1 over our -5/3. It's really just changed the sign in. Yep. That's it. If you want to verify, we can take 3/5 and multiply it by our -5/3, and if we do get -1, they are indeed perpendicular slopes. Questions on this here? I think we're good on finding perpendicular and parallel, yes? We'll finish up with 26 through 28. 26, find the value of each function. So V3. I just plug that value in. Which for us here would be 36 pi. Yes. The reason we can do this here is a little bit nicer. It's 3 squared. 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. When we multiply it by 4/3, well, 27 divided by 3 is 9. 4 times 9 is 36. 3 halves. Thirds pi times 3 halves cubed. Thirds pi times 3 halves cubed. 9 pi over 2. So all we're doing is just taking that value in, plugging it in. Now the last one is 2r cubed. Unfortunately, we can't just plug this into the calculator because the calculator is going to need a value for r. Now 2r cubed, since it's a single term without a plus, we can just cube both terms. 2 to the third is 8, r to the third is r cubed. Now we multiply the 8r cubed by our 4/3 pi. 8 times 4 is 32 over 3 pi r cubed. That's it. We're just taking those values and plugging them in. We did not finish today. We'll finish tomorrow.